Hey there, interwebs. I hope you're doing well. I am here with my cat Newt. Hey, you want to come up, bud? You want to come up? We'll say hi to everyone. Nope, you're gonna run away. Okay. Anyways, I was here with Newt because we wanted to talk to you all for a little bit about power and Cox. Brian Cox specifically. Speaking, I don't know what Newt's doing over there, but he's having a fun little exploration right now. He's exploring. Oh, he's purring. Listen to him purr. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's doing something else now. Just know that while I'm talking about what we're gonna be talking about, Newt's doing that right next to me. Thanks, bud. This is great. Buddy. I wanted to talk to you specifically about Brian Cox today, who many of you may know for his recent stint as the character of Logan Roy on the HBO Max show Succession.
You're playing toy f***ing soldiers! Go on! F*** off!
Now, I love Succession. It is a fascinating deep dive into some of the richest and worst in our society today, specifically around a family that runs a media conglomerate like Fox News. But the reason I want to talk about Brian Cox is less about Succession, at least at first, and more about something that he recently said and someone who he recently praised. And no, I'm not talking about him recently praising She Who Must Not Be Named, though that is also sort of tied into this. But She Who Must Not Be Named was not the only problematic person that Brian Cox recently praised. He was recently quoted in an interview talking about his experience working on the movie X-Men 2, which what he was praising about it was the film's director, Bryan Singer. For those of you who don't know, there are numerous allegations against Bryan Singer, some of which being him creating toxic work sets on some of the movies that he created, and perhaps most well known and disturbingly, he has many allegations of sexual abuse against him. But in the interview, Brian Cox went on to praise Bryan Singer as really, really gifted. That was his quote, and talked about how he had a great time on set, had a lot of fun, and it was a really enjoyable experience for him. And in the movie, Brian Cox plays a really great villain, and I'm sure that was his experience on the set and his experience of Bryan Singer, that he had a great time and Bryan Singer treated him well. But his experience of Bryan Singer stands in sharp contrast to a lot of other people's alleged experience on the set of X-Men 2. Namely, there were numerous incidents where people called Bryan Singer incredibly toxic, such as a time where he apparently got really high on something and messed up a production schedule. He also caused an accident to happen to actor Hugh Jackman because he made him perform without a stunt coordinator. And apparently things got so toxic that cast and crew on the set of X-Men 2 threatened to quit. And so to go back to Brian Cox, what's interesting to me is that he doesn't stop in his interview to talk about his experience of Bryan Singer and say that this is my experience of him, but he sends some empathy towards Bryan Singer for his experience on X-Men 2 and sort of tries to talk about why Bryan Singer may have created those toxic work conditions. Brian Cox literally says in the interview, well, he was under a lot of strain. Basically, he's trying to give empathy to Singer for saying, like, well, the studio was putting him under a lot of pressure. It was a big tentpole blockbuster movie, and that's why he sort of, like, strained under the pressure and created this sort of difficult set because the studio was pressuring him and he really wanted to get this movie done right. And to a degree, I am sure that that is absolutely true. I am sure the studio placed a lot of pressure on Bryan Singer. I'm sure they pressured him, they wanted to get him done under schedule. I'm sure there are many things that he was dealing with that was very frustrating to deal with from the studio, because when a lot of money involved, hey, capitalism, they want to have a lot of fingers in the pie and make sure that they get their things exactly the way that they want, which is typically trying to make the thing the most marketable, not the best artistic product. I am sure all that is true, and I am sure that that is in part of why Bryan Singer created a toxic work culture, because he himself was under a lot of pressure. This is something that capitalism does in many areas. It puts people under immense amount of pressure, and when they feel that pressure, they lash out at others. But what these systems also do is put these people in a lot of power and say that they get to control other people's bodies and decisions and actions, especially when they are on the job working for them. And anything done under those auspices is just, well, he's their boss, he gets to do it. We create this culture where those in power positions over others just seem to be able to do whatever they want with people under their power because they're seen as that's what they're supposed to be doing. But all of this brings me back to Brian Cox, because Brian Cox is focusing his empathy onto Bryan Singer, the man in power in that situation, and not his fellow actors or the people on the crew who are experiencing the toxic work conditions that Bryan Singer created. And it showcases to me how often in our society we want to empathize with those in power, because those are who we are told to want to be. We are told to want to be the bosses, the managers, the people with all the money. And so we ultimately in our society continually place empathy on those who have power over others and ignore empathy for those who are suffering under these systems, because we aren't told to want to desire to be those people. Brian Cox has more empathy for Bryan Singer, the man in power over him who is causing these harm to people like Brian Cox, other actors, because that's who he's told to empathize with in our culture. And Brian Cox himself is a veteran actor who is well celebrated and probably was insulated from a lot of the toxic elements that Bryan Singer created on the set, because he himself too was a man put in a powerful position and venerated as well. It just all kind of continually reinforces how we continue to see the voices of people with more platform and power empathizing with other people who have more platform and power, and that continually being the conversation, not those like the crew and cast members who suffered underneath these people who have power. I mean, even in a lot of the discussion around Bryan Singer's harm, we rarely get to talk about the entire crew that got harmed under his set on X-Men 2 and others, but often how Hugh Jackman specifically got hurt, because we know Hugh Jackman, we empathize with Hugh Jackman because he's gotten famous. Not to say I don't love Hugh Jackman, he's wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to him in Deadpool 3, but it is interesting that we center the conversation on Hugh Jackman specifically and not many others. They kind of get to be seen less as people and more a mass, just a mass of like crew and cast instead of specific individual human beings. We talk about like his list of accusers, which is bad that he has a list of accusers, but they sort of become this mass and dehumanized a little bit in the conversation as a result. And it's really most interesting to me that this is all sort of being centered around the actor Brian Cox, who, like I said, has been problematically praising problematic people, to overuse the word problematic because I'm an SJW like that. Because he also is the lead cast member in a show where we're focusing on powerful people. Succession is all about our sort of fascination with these families of people in charge. That show is all about just the families and interdynamics of these people who have power over others and how toxic and shitty they are. And yet, to a degree, we're also made to empathize with them and their struggles and less with their employees. We don't get a lot of look and discussion at the employees for their corporation within the show. In fact, one of the main people that we do get to see that viewpoint from is also tangentially related to the family as well. So even the viewpoint of the person who is sort of lowest on the power rung totem pole within this corporate structure within the show is also related to the family in some way. And we see this fascination with the lives of the rich and powerful a whole bunch in our media. I mean, look at shows like White Lotus, which is also on HBO Max, that has gotten a ton of attention because it's focusing on the lifestyles of the rich and the famous, as they say. And it's even led to things like the hotel where White Lotus was shot getting more and more bookings, because all of us wish to desire to have that position in the society. Yes, we look at those people and say, yeah, they're shitty people, but we see them as like, well, they're just the wrong shitty people. But if I was there, I would do better. I would be a better person. We just have the right people in charge. And I think it diverts the attention away from the fact that, this is what we say when we say like there are no good billionaires. It's not saying like every billionaire is inherently a shitty person when they start off. I more say that once you get us to a certain level of power within our society, it encourages you constantly over and over and over again to do shittier things and to escape repercussions for it. Yes, this system will ultimately goad on and give more power to those who are willing to do that and give up their ethics a lot faster, and will ultimately lead people who do sort of have no compunction or issues with taking advantage of other people faster. But anyone who reaches those positions of power will generally be led down a path where they're going to do shitty things and empathize more with shittier people, because that's who they see they should be empathizing with, because they don't see themselves as bad people. They see themselves as good people who are just trying their best in a shitty situation, instead of recognizing how the system ultimately allows you to dehumanize people who have less power underneath you. And so I just found all of this kind of fascinating, that this conversation was centered around Brian Cox empathizing with problematic figures like Bryan Singer, because he himself is playing a character that we're empathizing with someone in a powerful position and not empathizing with those who are harmed beneath him. Anyways, this was a sort of random rant that just got sparked by a random interview by a dude praising a really problematic guy. So, yeah. And it looks like Newt's done with whatever he was doing. Right, bud? You all good? Just chilling down there now? So, yeah.